was 588 CE. After a significant victory over the Byzantine Empire, the Sassanids in Persia had to confront a new political entity from East Asia, the Gökturks. After the death of Bumin, the founder of the Göktürk Empire, his brother Istemi and Bumin's eldest son Mukan took over the leadership. While Mukan administered the eastern part of the realm in Mongolia and opposed the Chinese principalities to the south, his uncle began a long journey to the west of Asia. After the integration of numerous Central Asian tribes belonging to the Tile Confederation, tens of thousands of steppe warriors led by Istemi, known as the Yapgu, stormed the lands of present-day Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan in the year 560 and defeated the White Huns in the 8-day Battle of Bukhara. Given that the Persians also advanced and incorporated the southern territory of the White Huns, Istemi renounced humiliating his Hunnic adversaries and granted new royal titles to numerous Hunnic nobles in the western part of the Göktürk Empire. After the Persian king Khosrau had succeeded in preventing the Turks from attacking Tabaristan in northern Iran, a tense peace prevailed between the Khaganate and the Sassanid Empire along the Oxus River. Meanwhile, Istemi sent high-ranking Sogdian diplomats and traders to Constantinople to establish trade relations with the Byzantines. The Eastern Roman Emperor replied positively to the proposal and in turn sent the diplomat Samarkos to the Göktürk capital in western Central Asia. Between the Khaganate and the Byzantine Empire, Sogdian trade experienced a new golden age. It also appeared that a Turkish-Byzantine alliance was being forged against the Sassanids, their common enemy, but the situation turned out differently. Istemi had laid the foundation for the Western Turkic Khaganate, but it was not an independent political entity. Despite the enormous achievements of Istemi, the highest political power dwelt with the Kagan, meaning with Mukan, in the east. Given the distances and the notion of collective sovereignty of the Turkic people, the ruling clan of the Ashina would inevitably be tempted to create an independent policy or even take control of the senior throne. Unfortunately for the Göktürks, the Ashina clan's political empire would indeed be weakened by internal strife. Following the death of Mukan in 572, his brother Taspar took over command of the realm. The power projection of the Turks now reached its pinnacle. Taspar accumulated so much power and wealth that he even referred to the Chinese princes as his sons. In Western Asia, the Persians did not even dare to assault the Turkic garrisons, while the Byzantines remained friendly, albeit careful in their exchange with the Turks. But after a 9-year golden period, Taspar died. Because of the unregulated succession to the throne and the pure might of the monarchy, 4 young princes, sons of Mukan, Taspar, Isik and Istemi, fought for control of the empire. We will deal with the events of the civil war in a separate video, but for the moment it is important to note that although the Göktürk Empire survived the civil war, the split between the eastern and western divisions was irreversible. The Khaganate was both politically divided and militarily weakened by the infighting. Now of all times, fighting broke out along the Oxus River. The first war between the Göktürks and the Sassanids was about to start. In 588, the Göktürk politician and commander Baga Khan crossed the Oxus and marched into Sassanid territory with an army of probably tens of thousands of soldiers, although the exact size of the Turkic army is difficult to determine. Moreover, it is likely that Baga was not a Khan or even Kagan, but presumably a reputable military figure of the Khaganate, for Baga cannot be identified with any of the well-known Turkic rulers of that time period. This general probably took over the throne in the Western Empire during the ongoing civil war. Within a short period of time, the Turks then attacked and routed the Sasanian soldiers in Balkh, in modern-day Afghanistan. This ancient city is considered to be one of the cradles of Iranian civilization and was known in ancient times as Baktra. It was traditionally a center of Zoroastrianism, and the predominant climate was and still is the cold desert climate. Thus, the region around Balkh is especially known for its blizzards, which can occur all winter long. The Göktürks reached the city in the early months of the year 588, and due to the mostly cold and dry climate that had prevailed in the Central Asian steppes since the 540s, the Turkic troops were able to adapt quickly to the climate conditions of northern Afghanistan. They routed the Sasanian garrison without much difficulty and thus conquered the Balkh province. But the general did not stop there. Without hesitation, Baga continued his campaign by attacking the surrounding cities of Talakan, Badghis and Herat. Although the exact motivation for Baga's incursion into Sassanid territory is not known, two factors speak for the necessity of a military operation. First, the Gökturks were in the middle of a civil war. In view of the partly chaotic political conditions and the constant outflow of food and gold for the mobilized troops of the civil war factions, the elite of the Western Empire felt compelled to organize a raid, and at the same time increase their economic influence over the remaining non-Turkic cities of the Silk Road. Secondly, however, climate conditions also turned out to be an issue. A recent study revealed that the history of the Gökturks ran parallel with extreme climate changes. In their study, Ganiev and Kukarsik state that at the turning points in the history of the Gökturks, periods of dry weather, extreme drought, or massive flooding always occurred in the lands of East Asia. The rebellion of Bumen, for example, lasted for 7 years because the Turks were still affected by the consequences of the extreme weather of the years 536 to 545. The civil war in the Khaganate was also accompanied by extreme weather in the early years 581 to 583. But 100 years later, the Göktürk rebellion against the Tang Empire would also be triggered by extreme climate conditions. In conclusion, this study and the events of the civil war indicate that Baga did not invade Herat and the other cities entirely voluntarily. Shortly thereafter, the Persian king Hormizd IV organized an army to stop the advancing Turks. Hormizd was the son of Persian king Khosrau Anushirvan and a Turkic princess whose name was not further mentioned. His mother was once given to Khosrau as a bride by Istemi to secure the Turco-Persian peace treaty of 560. Hormizd was therefore half Turkic. The grandson of Istemi now ironically went to war against his grandfather's dynasty. The war council he had convened entrusted Bahram Chobin of the noble house of Mihram with a command. Additionally equipped with the office of governor over the border province of Khorasan, which included Afghanistan, and 12,000 hand-picked soldiers, Bahram marched to Hyrkania in northern Iran. In April 588, he faced the Turkic army under command of Baga. Bahram was able to stop the advance of the Göktürk army in Tabaristan and thus inflicted a heavy defeat upon Baga Khan. Not much is known about the course of the battle though. We do not know anything about how many soldiers fought and how many were killed. Our Iranian source speaks of 12,000 Iranian soldiers versus 300,000 Turkic soldiers, which is of course an exaggerated claim. In 589, Bahram marched east and recaptured the Afghan city of Herat. It seems that there he had taken the golden throne of the Turkic Khagan. After the plundering, the Sassanid army crossed the Oxus, where Bahram personally killed Baga Khan with an arrow shot. or so it is told. Now Bahram Chobin realized the ambitions of the former king Khosrau and expanded the Sassanid influence over the cities of Tashkent and Samarkand. Iranian rule over these cities would not last long, but for the time being, Bahram had made a name for himself. On the one hand as a defender of the Iranian homeland, on the other hand as the conqueror of Baga Khan's army. Given that our only source is the Shahnameh, an epic about the Sassanid era written by Ferdowsi 400 years later, we cannot say for sure how these events really unfolded. The Gökturks did not write anything about these events, but using other sources that partly depicted the First Turko-Persian War, we can be sure that this war indeed took place. It must also be noted that the Turkic advance towards the Middle East along the cities of the Silk Road had been halted for the time being. Meanwhile, Hormizd had alienated the magnates by imprisoning and executing many renowned men, reducing the size of the cavalry force and decreasing the army's pay by 10%. Hormizd also declined the requests of the Zoroastrian priesthood to persecute the Christians. He did not really adhere to the Zoroastrian faith and therefore killed a great deal of them, including the chief priest himself. In turn, he antagonized Bahram, who was a devout follower of Zoroaster. Distrustful of Bahram even before the Eastern expedition, Hormizd did not tolerate the popularity of his own general, and given that Bahram's reserving of a few choice items of the booty for himself was an indication of rebellion, he removed the victor from his posts and sent him a chain and a spindle to show that he regarded him as a low slave, as ungrateful as a woman. Bahram's noble descent, his cultured manners and generosity, his military accomplishments against the Gökturks, and his leadership skills had earned him so elevated a position among his devoted troops and the public that their rebellion against the ungrateful king followed naturally. After having gained the support of many veteran generals from the Turko-Persian War, Bahram marched back from the Oxus frontier en route to the Sasanian capital in Ctesiphon. Prior to his arrival, the nobles from the capital seized power by slaying King Hormizd and tried to install Prince Khosrau as the new king. When Bahram's army arrived, they fled westwards, with Khosrau taking refuge in the Byzantine Empire. Bahram entered Ctesiphon and proclaimed himself King of Kings in the summer of 590, claiming that Ardasil, the upstart son of Sasan the shepherd, had usurped the throne of the Arsacids, and now he was re-establishing their right. He tried to support his cause with the following apocalyptic belief then current. The Sasanians had identified the Seleucid era, approximately 312 BC, with the era of Zoroaster, thereby placing Ardasil some 500 years after the prophet and leaving 500 years for the duration of their own dynasty. The close of Zoroaster's millennium was to witness chaos and destructive wars with the Shions, the Hephthalites, and the Romans, followed by the appearance of a savior. Bahram had risen some 500 years after Ardasil and had saved Iran from chaos, the Hephthalites, meaning the Gökturks in this case, and the Romans. He therefore claimed to be and was hailed by many as the promised savior, Kai Bahram Varjavan. With the goal of restoring the Arsacid Empire and commencing a millennium of dynastic rule in mind, Bahram did not gain any further support, as more and more noblemen sided with Prince Khosrau, who had assembled 40,000 troops and was now marching into the Sasanian province of Armenia from Byzantine territory. Khosrau's troops defeated the local Sasanian army near Lake Urmia, as Bahram arrived too late to the battle. Now, Bahram was fleeing himself from the enemy. He led his few thousand loyal soldiers back to the Oxus. After he crossed the river, he was, unexpectedly, well received by Tulan, the ruling Kagan of the Gökturk Empire. Bahram entered his military service. The man who had killed the high-ranking Baga Khan a year prior ironically now became part of Baga's people. Bahram became a highly popular figure within the Turkic realm after saving the Kagan from a conspiracy instigated by his brother. But Khosrau could not feel secure as long as Bahram lived. Thus he succeeded in having him assassinated, apparently with the help of the Ashna royal family, notably the Turkic queen. The remainder of Bahram's loyal troops then left the Gökturk Empire. The war has shown us three things. First, the border between the Gökturks and the Sasanians was blurred. Although the Oxus was supposed to serve as a protective wall for the Iranians against Central Asian tribes, the Turks passed through it without any problems and wiped out the garrisons in northern Afghanistan. Obviously, the Gökturks ruled over Iran it cannot be described as a tribe-like political entity, rather as a transcontinental Eurasian empire. The fact that a second Turkish army advanced into Tabaristan in the west also suggests that the Turks were thoughtfully planning their actions as they caught the Sasanians off guard. Therefore, secondly, this was not a barbaric incursion or spontaneous skirmish between Turks and Iranians. The war was wanted by both sides because the economic tensions had increased enormously for both peoples. While the Persians were constantly at war with the Byzantines, the Turks tried to keep their civil war-torn empire together. The supremacy over the Silk Road would have helped both nations in these struggling times. Thirdly, it should be noted that there wasn't real cultural enmity between both peoples. We already mentioned in a previous episode that the Gökturks were not described in the sources of the Chinese, Persians and Byzantines in the same way as previous and subsequent steppe peoples, for example the Huns and the Mongols. We do not know the reason for this. Even the Persians did not refer to the Turks as barbaric and took the power of the Göktürk Empire seriously. But it should therefore not surprise us that a highly respected general and even follower of the Zoroastrian faith, such as Bahram Chobin, suddenly switched sides and fled to the realm of his war enemies, entering the service of the Ashina dynasty. Bahram's story shows us that throughout history there have not only been wars between Turks and Iranians, but also personal and cultural contacts and exchange.